of coffee, then I'll go. Thought that I'd just drop by and let you know that I'm leaving town tomorrow. I'll cause you no more sorrow. I'll just have a cup of coffee, then I'll go. I brought the money like the lawyer said to do. It won't replace all the heartaches I've caused you. It won't take the place of loving you, I know. I'll just have a cup of coffee, then I'll go.
Welcome back to Grand Colombia, the channel, and welcome to Coffee Time Live. Got a different type of coffee time today. Kind of a little more serious. I'm going to talk about the other Colombia, the other side of Colombia. The kind I don't live with, therefore my life is like paradise. But there is another Colombia out there. And I don't talk about it because that's not the Colombia that I live in. But it exists, and it ties to this election, and I think it's real important to understand where this is all coming from. Because of the fear of, is it going to go socialist, communist? And it's not about that. And so we're going to get to the bottom of that today. And I'm going to use, I'm a fan of Afroguajira's video, and she just put out a video, and I've got some clips from it, and I'm going to kind of discuss it and review it. But then I'm going to talk directly about, excuse me, a side of Colombia that she never mentions. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about my own history so that you understand the context that I present this information in. And I'm going to start off by talking about the good news, the peso. Now, I said in the last two coffee times that the upside is, if the socialist won, that the peso would get weaker, and therefore the exchange rate would be more favorable. Well, it hit an all-time high last night of 41.37, I believe. I haven't looked today. I've been really busy. It's Sunday. Often it doesn't even change on Sunday. But notify window on YouTube says 4 p.m. Nothing I can do about it. YouTube is YouTube. I set it at the right time, and here we are. I'm looking right at it, 11 a.m. So, it's the blessing of working with YouTube. So those are going to be my topics today. And yeah, my voice is still harsh, and I don't know what's going on. 41.38 peso as of yesterday. Well, it's constantly fluctuating. It was 41.37 when I looked. So, there you go. And it'll probably go up from here. Somebody asked me how high it'll go. How would I know? How does anyone know? When I moved to Colombia 4 years ago, it was at 2,800. And I was pretty happy with that because a short time before I got here, it was around 2,500, which had been pretty consistent around there or a little higher. So I got here as it started going up, and it's been a mostly uphill climb since. Uphill climb is in a good way. Go through these greetings here first. Augustine, this will be my first live if I make it. I'm excited. Well, if you're here, welcome. I've been getting a ton of comments. He discovered this channel and he's been going back through videos all the way back to early in Ecuador time. I pity him. The sound and the camera shake was so bad then. Rob, good morning. How you doing, Rob? Ben Lake, good morning from the other Fort Worth. Okay. Yuka, warm greetings. How you doing? I didn't know anything was warm in Finland. And thank you, of course, for the channel contribution you sent. I appreciate it. Emil, good morning. That's his condo number, in case anybody was wondering. He sent me a contribution, but he sent it some weird. I have no idea what it was. I clicked on the link and it was just some bizarre thing. And I've got 4 different ways to receive contributions, but whatever that wasn't one of them. Coleman, how you doing? Folsom, California. Yeah. I wish he was sitting in the penitentiary and still making music. You know, I saw him live when I was around 10 years old. I think I told that story once in a video. I've told most of my life in a video. I'm going to tell you something today I've never mentioned, not just in a video. I don't believe I've ever told anybody the story I'm going to tell today. Good morning from Pensacola. We should be retired to Armenia, Circassia area in about a year. Chad, how you doing, Chad? When are you getting down here? I'm looking up because my glasses are dirty. Usually I clean them before the video in case there's a smudge. Instead, I smudge them before the video. Good morning from Minneapolis. Dan, how you doing, Dan? Where are you right now, Dan? In Armenia, Javier, how you doing? Play guitar? No time. It's not my thing. I haven't played guitar for anybody except my kids growing up since high school when I played in a horrible band. We would go out and play for schools, and there were a couple other little venues that we played. I remember there was this one seedy bar, and we thought we were really killing it because we pulled in $200. So there were 4 of us, but we'd pull in $200 on some of those gigs, and that was pretty awesome. But you know, I've always sucked. I just like to play for myself. I used to compose songs, and you know, we all used to do different things. I used to write poetry, but Bill, we will be in Colombia mid-August, starting our slow travel and retirement. Back in Ibagué. I thought you were, but I wasn't sure. Okay, so let's get to it. I mentioned I guess where I'm going to start. I'm going to start with our friend Afroguajira. It's going to be very difficult because stupid me, I put these clips together all in one clump with a space between them, but then it's just black. So I've got to kind of figure out how to run this thing and turn off and on my camera. So let's give it a shot. It's going to be sketchy. It's I pulled out about 4 minutes worth of her stuff. All right, here we go.
Buenas noches. Welcome to Afroguajira's news. You have to believe me, guys, everything I'm gonna say because I'm wearing a tie and also have glasses and I have horses in the back. Horses!
Okay, started off with that because, as usual, she's just kind of hilarious. And yeah, I just really appreciate her. If you don't know her channel, look it up. But the reason I'm showing you this is she's expressing a viewpoint of most of those people that voted for the socialist. So let's get on with it.
I will say in Colombia there isn't communism. I can even say that there are a few people who share and support that economic or political model.
Okay, what did she say? She says that in Colombia there aren't communists, and there's few people that support that economic model. That's not true. However, that's what she believes, and we're gonna get more of this here soon. And she's not alone. A vast portion of the country sees what's going on from her point of view. And I think you'll better understand they didn't vote for a socialist, they voted for something else. As a matter of fact, they're completely against. Most people are against socialism. Okay.
Gustavo Petro, it might seem that he belongs to the far left, but actually I wouldn't say that. I will even say that Gustavo Petro belongs to, I can say, a moderate, maybe middle left, or even the center.
Okay, I realize that sounds really bizarre, because if you actually look at his platform, for example, there's nothing moderate about it. If you look at his history, there's nothing moderate about it. But now, let me, don't guess, just hear this through. I think it's really important to understand where these voters were coming from and how they see this. Now, I'm sorry for the dark pauses. There's no way for me to get past those.
And you maybe say, come on, Maya, we know that Gustavo Petro belonged to the guerrilla. Guys, he got demobilized, I think that in 1990.
Because he left after 10, 12 years, I think it was about 10 or 12 years, he left his guerrilla organization and he went into politics. They believe it's all in the past. He's a different person now. I think I was part of what I cut out, but she says he went to college for economics. He believes in environmentalism and economics. You know, he's not that guerrilla anymore. He's not that guy anymore.
But you know what? The peace agreement was signed in, I think, I know the date, but I have to look like I am checking. Was in 2016, you know. And once the armed conflict finished, so people now is thinking and are expressing things that haven't been heard, you know. And I'm talking about quality of life, you know.
Now that's the crux of where the reality hits the perception. And that's what I'm going to talk a lot about after we get through these clips, about the other Colombia. The Colombia that so many people think is done. We signed a peace agreement. It's over. You know, I'm not seeing any armed conflict anymore. So it's done, and we don't want to live in the past anymore. And since we don't have to deal with that armed conflict, then whatever money the government spends, which can't be very much because they really don't do much for taxes, but whatever money that is, that should go into the welfare of the people, we shouldn't be wasting that on a non-existent enemy.
I don't know if you remember, guys, the protests in 2020. The huge protest, I did videos about it, by the way. The target before was guerrilla. We have to end the guerrilla. The guerrillas are over. So now people is starting to ask for more things.
We're just going to skip on to the next.
And if you check here, all the people who voted for Gustavo Petro are people living in the peripheric, in the, I will say, the forgotten region of Colombia. People from all the peripheric, people, poor people, is the one voting for Petro, because we are tired of the same things, guys. We are asking for quality of life. I don't know how it's being poor in other parts, like United States, but it's not the same being poor in United States than being poor here. And we are not asking for, I don't know, we just want to be, I don't know, in a hammock, I don't know, scratching my belly, my back, I don't want to work. We are not asking for that, guys. We want to work, and we want dignity.
Okay, I'm going to pause it there and get back to it. This is where I'm going to insert my little story. Now, the one I've told before, I'm going to quickly go through it. As many of you know, I lived in poverty from 8 years old, 7, to just over 10 years old. And when I say poverty, the kind of poverty that you don't see in the United States anymore. And part of what the concept we're going to talk about today is the degrees of poverty. In those days, when I was 7 to 10, my mother wasn't around. I mostly raised myself in those years. I lived in upstate New York where it was cold. I had to cut wood because we didn't have heat. We didn't have an outhouse or a toilet. We had an outhouse outside because we couldn't afford to fix the plumbing in the house. I had to hunt squirrels. I got so sick of them. I didn't know how to cook them. I didn't know how to skin them. Kind of figured it out. Eating, half-cooked squirrels with fur still stuck on them. Had to get water out of a well. It was about as poor as you get. And those days were kind of rough. I went to school, but I had hand-me-down. My brothers had all moved out at this time period. They were much older. And I had these hand-me-downs with holes in them and sleeves down to here and shoes that were like swimming fins. So, I get poverty, and I left home at 15 as a big part of it. Hey, I can do better on my own than this. And I did. And, I climbed to the point where I actually got rich. And then I went bust and got poor, but climbed back up and never got rich again, but was doing pretty well, doing very well. The equivalent today of about 100,000 a year, and didn't have anything to complain about. I had more than one car, and life was good. Here's a part of the story that I've never really expressed, never told anybody. When I got sick, it got to the point where I could no longer work. And it was before I was bedridden. I could still get around, but I would get dizzy and fall every so often. I just couldn't work anymore. So I left my work, and I'm running back and forth to doctors trying to figure out what's going on, why I'm having all these issues and instant nosebleeds that would just be spontaneous gushers, all kinds of weird things. I was chewing up my savings, and I couldn't stay living where I was living. I was living in a nice apartment complex, the kind where you got to have a top-notch credit score, and you better be driving a nice car, and all the amenities in a nice area. That's how I was living. I couldn't maintain it. Well, I knew that I was fast headed to where I could not maintain it. And so I moved to a place in Durham, North Carolina, near where I was, because I thought at the time, well, I'll get better. I'll go back to work. Everything will be great. Well, that never happened that way. But where I moved was a place, you can look it up on the map. in Durham. It was called Bentwood Park off of Junction Road. If you know anything about Durham, this is kind of a notorious place. It's a complex. It's an old apartment complex, run down, boarded up windows. And I was literally the only, I know I hate that word literally, but it actually applies here. I was the only white face in this complex of hundreds and hundreds of people. Now, the police, when I first moved there, the police would not come into that complex because it was run by the Crips. And there was, I mean, the going concession was peddling drugs out of, but I could afford to be there. And so I could take care of myself, or in those days I could, before I got all fat and out of shape. But I moved in there, and life was pretty tough there. I got robbed once. I wasn't home. They waited. But the guy next to me, this old guy, he comes out. He was all stressed out one day, and he was arguing with his wife. And I come out and said, "Everything okay?" And he'd lost his job. He was in construction work. So I told him, I said, "Well, did you go on the internet? Because there's a ton of construction jobs at that time that you could get on the internet." I don't know anything about computers. So I brought him to my house, sat him down with my laptop. I showed him how to advertise himself, and I set up his first ad. Well, 2 days later, he got a construction job for $5,000 with very little cost, very little expense to him. He was so happy. Well, word spread through this complex. Ever since that happened, I was treated completely different. All of a sudden, I became the team mascot, and my life got much better there. But my point was that through my life, I've lived from hand to mouth, nothing. The shame of poverty when you're in school and getting teased at that early age, leaving and, building my way out of that kind of lifestyle to the point where I was on the other end of the spectrum, lost all that, built myself back up again, got sick, had found myself crawling back into the world of poverty, only now in an urban situation. So I understand these topics. It's not like I sit back from a distance. I've said for a long time that there are no poor in the United States. Well, there's no poor in that today, if I were 7 or 8 years old in that situation, well, probably, child services would step in. But, you got welfare, you got all kinds of security that didn't exist when I went through poverty. Today, if somebody came to the house and saw the outhouse, no running water and no heat, and here I'm out there with a .22 rifle at 8 years old, pinging squirrels in the head so I can eat, that wouldn't fly today. But I experienced it, and I'm glad I did. It really taught me a lot of independence at an early age, and so my life has had this vision of the entire spectrum of what life can be, good and bad. And so when we talk about things here in Colombia, I actually get it. I understand where they're coming from. And you have a hierarchy of poverty. You've got, first thing, you got to eat. That's your first thing. And then, because what was more important? The fact that I was wearing clothes that didn't fit and were nasty, or that I was going to eat that day? I guarantee you it was, whether you're going to eat that day. So you have this hierarchy of poverty. And that's where I say in the United States, they're way up on the hierarchy of poverty. Here in Colombia, you have some resources, and you've got family and things like that. But there are people that drop out of that. And they can be in the same situation I found myself in. Venezuelans that come here with nothing. Sometimes, they do those little tin shack cities and things because, there's no plumbing, there's no, I had it better off. At least I had a well, so it's important to understand that when we have the rest of this conversation. All right, so let's get back to what she has to say.
You cannot tell me, guys, well, you can say yes, but please don't do it, that this is about communism and capitalism. No, we are not talking about those things. We don't want to see children dying of hunger in Colombia. We don't want to see elderly people selling bonais on the traffic lights. Guys, 80 years old, they should be, I don't know, enjoying life. I know they are in the traffic light selling bonais, selling ice cream. Let me know. You have been in Colombia. Have you seen them selling those bonais? You know how sad is that? She understands how it feels of not having what to eat one day. She understands the struggle of counting cent by cent to put a meal together for our family. Colombia is Afro, and Colombia is also indigenous. So it's amazing to have a representation like Francia Marquez in the in the politics. And it's about time to change our mindset. Because Francia, when she got the credential that makes her, I don't know, the vice president, she received dancing and singing. And you know what? I was surprised because many people were saying like, oh my God, why the hell she's doing that? Oh my God, no, she have to be more formal. Why she's doing that? No. We are Colombians. We dance. We sing, and that have to be normal. That's not something. Because she's dancing or singing doesn't make her less professional or something like that. That we deserve to live sabroso. She say, nosotros merecemos vivir sabroso.
That means the flavor of life.
Is to have the opportunity to have a better life, to have an opportunity to, I don't know, to live with dignity. And I know that many of you are going to tell me, you're crazy, the left and you in the power, look at what happened to Venezuela, to Cuba. No, it's not the same. It's not the same. And if it's the same, oh my God, that is going to be terrible, and I'll let you know. Maya, you were grown. Yes, I was grown, and this is terrible. How the hell we can change this,
Okay. It was a very interesting video, but she really nails it at the end, expressing absolutely it's not going to be Cuba, it's not going to be Venezuela. Well, here's the good part of that is people didn't vote for socialism. They didn't vote for Cuba. They didn't vote for Venezuela. And so if it goes in that direction, you got people like her, they're wary and they're going to put the brakes on. And you also have the Congress is not of the party, they're more conservative. And so he can't just, I've said this before, he can't do it by decree. And he's also got a limited term. So everybody that's freaking out, I mean, it's sad that it went there, but I suppose it shouldn't be unexpected. Younger people have been preached to for years about how that political ideology is for the people and how it's going to improve and how the resources are going to be taken from stupid things like fictitious war against an internal enemy and, you know, be able to turn it into something positive. Let me bring up the map again here of the election. Now, see, the purple is the people who voted for Petro. Now, note where they are. The ones in this region right here, this is the Amazon region. So there's not a whole lot of population there. So you can almost ignore that. But let me bring up this map. This was just a few years ago. All the white area are the areas that are just completely safe in Colombia. Now, when you see, like down in this in the bottom here, this huge block of red that shows FARC and ELN presence. Well, it's not that entire block of red, but they're active in those areas. So when you put colors on a map, it appears to be much greater than it is. But what's important is the areas where they hold that influence. And I'm going to follow up here with another map. Okay, this one I think is probably more representative of what's going on. Now you see the arrows, where is it? It's opposite, right over here, these arrows. These right here. That's primarily where the FARC exists. And the upper arrow on this side, right there, the upper one that's around the Cali area, I've actually got a good friend that lives there. And she lives in a different world. As a matter of fact, I've been there before a number of times, but you know, she's always telling me, oh, don't come unless I have free time, because you don't ever want to be alone there. You'll get, you know, kidnapped or crime or whatever. The roads get blocked. There's all kinds. In that area, when there's protests, they usually become violent because there's so much criminal activists under the guise of socialism. I mean, the FARC and ELN are both supposedly socialist ideology, but they're really criminals. And then on the other side, over here, those arrows, that's primarily the home areas of the ELN. Now, what's the blue? That's the Clan del Golfo. They're essentially Sinaloa cartel growing and expanding in Colombia. Those areas that are pointed out and in the blue are dangerous areas. They're not areas I live in, but depending on where you are, they may exert a lot of control over what's going on. In the ELN area where it's red, if you've got a mayor of a town that doesn't go along with them, he gets assassinated. There were, 60-some assassinations last year? Don't quote me on that. It was a large amount. I think it was approximately that. In Colombia, by these criminal organizations. That's not internal peace. And you have Mexico in here growing and growing and growing. They've become quite strong. They're actually the strongest group in Colombia now. And they're dealing in billions in the drug trade. And they're just getting stronger. I mean, one of the strongest entities in the world is fast becoming the Mexican cartel. So just because they signed a peace agreement in 2016 doesn't mean there's peace. There's peace. You notice up in the area she lives, it's above and to the right of that blue area. That's the Guajira area. And before that, she lived in Bogota. Well, guess what? There are no insurgencies where she lives now and where she lived before. So she doesn't have a firsthand experience that's somewhere else. It doesn't exist anymore because I'm not experiencing it. And they did experience it in the past. So it did retrench, but it's been growing again. Why has it been growing? Because they did the peace agreement, and so the government's been laying off them. And what are they? They're criminals, and criminal organizations are going to grow. So that's the state of what's going on in Colombia. If anything, they should be stepping up the pressure to knock these groups back down to keep Colombia in the state they got it to. And they really need to get this Mexican cartel out of here. That's the sad situation in Colombia. I'm far more concerned about that than I am about petro, to be honest with you, because there's limitations on petro. There doesn't appear to be a lot of limitations on these groups. And one of my concerns with petro is that he actually kind of plays into that. I mean, what's the first thing he said? No more extraditions. Not the first thing, but he doesn't want extraditions to the United States. Well, they had a big blow against that Mexican cartel when, what's his name? Otiano. They just captured him and extradited him back to the United States. He's a leader of that group. He was a partner of who was that Mexican guy that was all in all the news, escaped from a prison. He had this tunnel. Oh, I can't think of his name. Kind of a short, squat guy. I'd know it if I heard it, and some of you know it. The most famous guy from maybe 10 years ago in Mexico that got captured. This guy who they caught and extradited, Chapo, that's it, Chapo Guzman. They were equal partners. He's in Colombia. Well, they caught him, sent him back to the U.S. If Petro were president at the time last year, he wouldn't have been extradited. It would have been kept here. And depending on your view, now what's the danger of these groups? The danger of these groups is it can bring back corruption. There's already corruption in those areas. I mean, if you're in a small town like here, well, they're right here, and the arrow on this side where my friend lives, right over there in that red area. Let's say you're a mayor of that town, and you don't want to get along with these people, and they come in and they say, look, well, we're gonna share in this money if we can transit drugs without being bothered by your police force, you know, from here to Cali to Buenaventura and onto a ship. You know, I'm just hypothetically saying. The guy says no, he's assassinated. So he's in a place where maybe he's got a choice, take the money or die. How many are going to choose die over take the money? So you have these situations that are growing again. They're coming back in Colombia. Now, the good news for me is that I'm in that white center area that's safe and protected. And it'll be, if it moves at the rate it's moving, it'll be a number of years before we see any impact of that where I'm living. But I don't want it to impact at all. And her point of view is that this is all over, but it's not over. On the other hand, I get where she's coming from, because that ring of voters, those are the impoverished areas of Colombia. I mean, you see poverty everywhere, but those are in particular the really deep, impoverished areas in Colombia. Those are the third world areas where you see distended bellies and flies buzzing around in some of those areas. So, and she lives in the heart of one of them. So if you're there and you're seeing that, and if you watch your videos, you see a fair amount of poverty going on there. You want to have an opportunity. And if you think that there's no more strife against the criminal organizations, that there must be money there. And if somebody's promising you, like they always do, we're going to make this better, we're going to do this for the people, we're going to turn things away from, you know, wasting on something that doesn't exist, and we're going to work for social programs. They come out and said, we're going to help the elderly with a cash fund, and we're going to help single moms. And so they come across with a list of things that shows their supposed intention to do things for the people. And what was one of the things she was talking about? She's talking about the vice president, who's Afro-Cuban. And she's very proud of it. And somewhere in there, she even said that she was proud to have somebody elected that looks like me. And I about choked. I was drinking my coffee when I was watching, and I about choked on it, because where does that come from? Where does that come from? Where do terms like that come from? Because first of all, she doesn't look like her. She doesn't look anything like her. Now, if you want to say background, yeah, the woman has a poverty background. However, she was a political activist, a community organizer early on. She got caught up into the socialist movement early on. And, it's a way to live. And she's done well since she was in poverty. And that was her way out. So the propaganda is strong. And a lot of people believe what she did in that video, that we had to vote for a change, because it just wasn't happening for the outlying areas. Now, I propose here that if you look at Colombia's economic history, when I lived here 20 years ago and unemployment was over 50%, it was pretty horrendous. And the FARC were actually right here in Armenia. My ex-wife had been kidnapped once by the FARC. And so it was pretty hot and heavy. And when I lived here before, it was not the best place to be. I didn't care at the time. This was back when I was strong and healthy and, could take care of myself. But it was a tough country. It was the Wild West. And that turned around. And they got beat back. They got beat back by force. And they were actually on the brink of extermination when Santos came along and said he's going to make a peace agreement. And it's worked real well, right? They've been coming back. So what happened to the economy after these groups got beat back into the fringes? It started to grow, and it's been growing, and it's been growing. And pre-COVID, the COVID was the fuse that set all this off. But just before COVID hit, the unemployment rate had gone from well over 50% to around 27%. Not great, but it had been a steady improvement. The gross domestic product steadily improved. The middle class steadily grew. As the poverty shrank, the middle class grew. These people, there was some mobility going on. Now, granted, it's in those yellow areas that this was taking place. It didn't spread far enough, fast enough. And then when COVID hit, that lit the fuse. Had COVID not hit and we continued on this path, you'd see that purple area shrinking as the yellow grew, because the economics kept improving and would have kept improving. It positioned Colombia in the position they are now, where they're one of the fastest recovering countries in the world, because it had the right kind of economy and because it's quite self-sufficient. So all the key things were in place, but then COVID comes along. You got 2 years of moving back, of increased poverty, of lost businesses. Poverty is almost up to 40% now. People are angry. People are pissed off. And you see a guy perceived as, well, he's going to take us to 2 more years like we've just had because it's a recent memory thing, or we're going to get somebody who completely changes it up. It's going to be a whole new world with new opportunities. That's why the election was what it was. And that's why you can hold out hope, because the people don't want what it is they are, but they do want what they were trying to sell. So you don't have, as a matter of fact, you have a strong anti-communist, anti-socialist feeling throughout most of Colombia, with the exception, college students. Okay, that's that. I hope that makes sense, was worthwhile to you. I got kind of passionate about it as I watched her video, and I thought she did a really good video expressing the views of many Petro voters. Okay, let me go. Buenos dias, California. Forecast today 103 degrees. Woo! It's definitely a different level of poverty for the lowest level of Colombia. You're correct in saying there's a dramatic difference in being poor. In Canada, the homeless are often fat. Yeah, go to any Walmart in the US. Food banks everywhere here. They eat out of garbage. Petro is building a coalition. The Liberal Party and the Green Party are supporting him. Yeah, he won, and anytime anybody wins office, they're going to try to consolidate their power. Kind of reminds me of Chavez. He did the exact same thing, but conservatives also do the same thing. So we will see. El Chapo, thank you for that. Sin nombre, he's in Manhattan, in a Manhattan jail, cellmates with Giselle Maxwell. Yeah, but he won't try to kill himself. There's too much money there. Colombia will take a Venezuelan path now. If that were to come to pass, I think it's going to be a few years. I don't think so, but we'll see. We'll see. Socialism is like drugs. A little is okay, but you have to know when to stop. None of it's okay. It's social programs is not socialism. Socialism is never okay. All it is a means of controlling people. Social programs, I'm for a lot of social programs, and I'm a true hater of socialism. She was happily a black female like her as vice president. Francia is Afro-Colombian, not Afro-Cuban. I said Afro-Colombian. Not sure what you mean. I didn't say Afro-Cuban. Communism is always introduced in the socialist Trojan horse. Canada is a good example right now. Won't disagree with that. Looks like me means like live presenters on Colombian tea, people in power look European. No, I get what she means, but that phrase is part of an ideological package, and it becomes repeated. It's an idea. See, the truth is, if things are working, if things are going well, why do you care who's running the government if he's doing a good job? The criteria shouldn't be anything except the kind of job that he's doing or is going to do. That should be the criteria. There's a reason that this kind of thing is promoted and presented as a legitimate reason to vote for somebody or to support somebody, and it's part of a package. And you'll see it worldwide where this operation takes place. Lenin did the same with socialists when the Red Terror came. Castro did the same. Lenin playbook may have meant Colombian. Well, if I said Cuban, I'm sorry. I'm quite sure I said Colombian. But I'll go back and I'll see. And of course, she's Colombian. Like I said last week, legalize all drugs all over the world, marijuana instead of $400 an ounce in New York. And just like last week, I said that's not going to be your answer. It doesn't get rid of criminals. And I gave some examples of that. Drugs and prostitution will always have criminal involvement, and making either legal doesn't apply. You do not take the criminal element out of it. Last week, when you said that, I gave you some prime examples. And prostitution's a good mirror. You have legal prostitution in Colombia, but you have pimps running operations in Colombia. These webcam girls, there's a lot of them in Colombia. They're actually being run by criminal organizations. They put up these houses with tons of rooms. They set up all these webcams in them, and they collect the money. The girls, if they're lucky, they get half of the money. The other half goes into the criminal operation. So, well, if I say Cuban, I apologize. People say shit all the time, but clearly I was aware that she's Colombian. I still don't believe it. Because I haven't been thinking Cuban at all, but yeah, maybe I did. Who knows? Colombia is fundamentally different from Venezuela. Venezuela's economy relies entirely on selling oil, importing food. They didn't grow oil. Yeah, but when Chavez took power his first couple years, things went pretty well. It's as they consolidated power, as always happens, and grew stronger, that, things started to change. And Venezuela's economy wasn't entirely on oil, although that was a huge part of it. It's a big part of Colombia. That's somebody showed last week. Oil and refineries are the top couple items of export, but Colombia is well diversified. Venezuela used to have a huge agricultural export, which dried up and went away. So any attempt to nationalize sectors of the private economy will be a big sign. Hopefully there's enough opposition to take place at the Capitol. That's one of the things that he went into a notary and signed, pledging that he would never do that. And there were a couple things like that removed barriers for people that would not vote for anyone. If there was any concern by the people that voted for him that he was going to lead them down the socialist path, he wouldn't have gotten most of those votes. But he did a lot of things to it isn't anything you can't go back on, but he went to a notary, which is considered like like a steel vault, put it in a lockbox, and promised that that's one of the things he wouldn't do. Look at alcohol prohibition in the U.S. It became legal again, no Capone's. Yeah, somewhat, but it's really a very different situation. I get what you're saying. I'm just saying that where that's taken place, it hasn't worked out that way. And you have personal use drugs in Colombia that are illegal, but it's the criminals that are selling it all. It just doesn't. I used to believe that, and if it was just a handful of years ago, I'd be right there with you with that same mindset. But after a while, when you see these things take place in various places in the world, including Ecuador, here, and you see that it's still the criminals that are involved in those operations, because what are they going to do? If you take away their drug business, then what are they going to do? Well, they're going to take over the legal aspect of it. It just doesn't work. Chavez made business selling products at prices lower than production costs, subsidized with oil money. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And the reason the oil business in Venezuela actually went under was for political favors. They would replace people from oil industries that knew that, and they would put in political appointees into those positions. And there was a draining of knowledge. The actual people that knew how to make the country run, that knew how to or make the oil industry run, were slowly siphoned out of that, and political people were put in. And it went to hell. It fell into disrepair. It just broke down. The thing I find that is strange, that after age 40, you have a very difficult time getting a job if you lose your existing job. You mean in the US? Because that's kind of true. It's true here. There's a problem here in that people aren't taught what opportunities are. Now, look at Afroguajira. She comes from a poor area, but she lived in Bogota for a while. Is she poor right now? No, she's put her efforts into this video project, and she's doing quite well. She's paying for her new car. It's not paid for, but she's able to afford it and pay for it. She's living okay, and she's using her money. If you see her video clips, you see her mom's house. It's all been painted and some remodeling done. Some of her other relatives, there's some new, fresh things going on. She's not selfish with it. She's sharing that. In Colombia, there's opportunity for advancement, but the problem is most people don't realize how to do that. And there's no effort by this government to show people. Now, the government does the right thing in that if you want to start a business, they'll get out of your way. There's, sometimes you need permit or something like that, but it's no real obstacle. And so the groundwork is here for that, but they don't show people how to do it. I think that's a huge failing. People could climb out of their own poverty. Hell, that's what I did, beginning at 15 years old. But, if you don't know how, fortunately, I knew how because of other things in my background. I'm not going to argue about it. I get where you're coming from, and I don't discredit your theory on that, because, as I said, I believe that for a number of years. I just don't believe it anymore because I see to the contrary. And when you see it actually occurring to the contrary, you can't deny anymore that, well, that's not working. That didn't work. You can deny it, but then you're just kind of, Brandon's a great president too, right? You can decide anything. Let's see. Tommy in Colombia, they can specify a job requirement, sex, age, totally illegal in the West. And fire someone's too old. Notice that there are very few women selling clothes. This isn't the USA. It's not Canada. It's not Ecuador. Colombia is Colombia, and some things you're going to say aren't great, and other things you're going to say are great, and that's going to be true. And some things that you look at, you may not understand, but might actually be better in practice, or that might be worse. But it is what it is. It's a country. It's what it is. And so, from the outside, to look in and make judgments on if that's proper, it really is uninformed judgments, therefore not helpful. There's still things that I kind of wait and see, and I've been here for quite some time. However, I will say that there's work to be had here. I was talking to somebody the other day who had lost her job, and she started selling clothes on Facebook. And I said, well, I go on Facebook, there's 1 million people selling clothes. She goes, yeah, but she hustles. She starts with people in her community, family, and things like that, but it's grown, and now she's actually making a living selling clothes. She gets shipments out of Bogota a couple times a week, and she sells, various types of clothing, mostly female clothing, and she's doing okay. Yeah, there's work here, there's opportunity here, but you have to know how to do it, stumble into it. You got to hustle. Afroguajira did. And, you could say, well, if you did it, why don't all these people do? The reason is because when you're living in that kind of poverty, and I'll speak to when I was living in that apartment complex in Durham, because I saw this all the time. At some point, it feels hopeless. You kind of give up. The police wouldn't come in there, but then again, the people in that complex didn't want the police in there because they didn't trust the police. They saw the police as the enemy. Police weren't the enemy, but they saw it that way because they're living in essentially a lawless environment. And when you're living in a lawless environment, you don't want any law to intrude on it. So if I want to do something illegal, I don't want the police around to stop me. And that was the reason. It's not, you could say, well, police brutality. It wasn't the real reason. They want, they call them popo. They didn't want them in there because they didn't want to have anything that they were doing interrupted. So if somebody's driving in and picking up some weed or oxys or whatever, they didn't want the police to disrupt that. They wanted a safe environment in order to do their illegal activities. And there was a lot of illegal activities, including selling moonshine, by the way. Well, it's not rampant, but you could buy moonshine there. You could buy all kinds of illicit, things in that complex. So when you have a distrust of the government, of the police, of it, because you've built your own kind of bubble to live in, you end up with things like there's no hope, there's nothing but what I'm living in. And you see that in a lot of places in Colombia because they're not being told the other side of the coin. They're not being told things that they could do. This is a self-sufficient, industrial type of personality, Colombians, and if they were given some guidance, it would go a long way. And I've always felt that was a huge missed opportunity for the Colombian government. Signs, we are hiring everywhere, but in Ecuador, only young people work. Old ladies can just sit in mercados selling produce. Well, that's working. But, really want to talk about Ecuador because the abuses in the employment system in Ecuador are insane. I'll quickly mention the standard practice. Well, I'll give you some example. I'll give you one example of something that actually happened. And I have friends there that own businesses, and they confirm that this is prevalent in Cuenca. Venezuelans would come in desperate. And so a restaurant would hire them to wait tables. Well, there you pay once a month and you pay after the work. So these people would come in and wait tables, primarily women. The men would usually get construction work, but the women would get things like wait tables. And so they would be waiting the tables. They would work for a month, having to pay for the bus or whatever, investing in that. Then come the month, the restaurant owner would say, you're doing a lousy job, get out. And he'll hire another Venezuelan and do it again. And so he'd never pay any wages. Problem is, they converted their government to a socialist-based style. And so when you go to the employment office, no one has any incentive. It's like going to what DMVs used to be. They're just there drawing a paycheck. They're not there to help anybody. If you go in and file a complaint, nothing will happen to it. You're wasting your time. Therefore, people stop going. And so you have that cycle. You wouldn't have that here. You don't have that here. So you know, all places aren't the same. Check out some of the classifieds and online Colombian news sites. Not sure what that means. I see the peso at 40.95 with petro. It'll probably get worse. Well, you mean it would get better? You see, when let's say the peso goes to 5,000 pesos tomorrow. If you're living on pesos, if you're getting paid in pesos, if you're Colombian, you're here, you're oblivious to that. The only place it'll start happening is import prices will start skyrocketing. But because pretty much everything that you really need to have to live is in Colombia, you don't really see the impact of that anywhere near to the same extent. When you're in a country like Ecuador, where you're really dependent on certain things, then it can have a little more effect, but still there's a lot of basic things that are self-sufficient in Ecuador. But they're dollar for dollar. So they're going to have what happens with a peso doesn't affect them either. I'm trying to express this idea, and I'm grasping at the words, the thoughts there, but it really won't have such a huge impact. There will be some impact later, but for us right now, it's just a benefit. I don't try to be judgmental at anything here about a situation because you don't know all the facts. It's usually a deep subject. Very true. I hate going to the DMV. Actually, it got kind of pleasant going to the DMV. In the 80s, it was a nightmare, but then it got kind of pleasant. Exporters see it and benefit from it the most. Well, exporters in other countries. Exporters here get hurt. No, I'm sorry. Reverse that. If you're here in Colombia, I'm getting loopy. If you're here in Colombia and you're exporting products and the peso is weak, you can make a killing because people are going to want your products because they're cheaper. So I think that's what you were trying to say, and that's true. If you're an importer, that's where you're going to run into a problem. Colombians will need more pesos to live, not because of the exchange rate between the U.S. dollar. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Ever lived in Mexico? Never lived there, been there a million times. I've done a couple videos about Mexico and why I would never live there. Exporters in Colombia will do better. More potential buyers. Yeah, I meant to say that, and I realized I had said the opposite, and I didn't intend it to be. Kind of like Afro-Cuban, I guess. I'm going to look that up because I find it hard to believe I said that. But hey, we all make mistakes. All right, we're over the hour, so I'm going to cut it loose here. We had a steady stream of chats, so we'll take that as our live Q&A today. I'd be interested to know your opinions on what I said today. If you disagree, please go to the regular comments of this video when I shut it off and leave me some comments there so I can get some idea of what you thought about different aspects of what I talked about today, and if there's any light that was shed on the subject. Alzheimer's. Yeah, maybe that's it. Who knows? And so that's it. We're going to call it. We're going to call it here. George, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So where are we at? Here we go. See you next week.